very, very first thing, I think it was Friday, November 1st. We're all just minding our own business, and we get the emergency announcement: a new Godzilla film directed by Yamazaki. What are your thoughts? What's your impression?
Excited. I was not at work, but I wasn't home when I saw this, and I literally had to stop everything I was doing and I forget who I reached out to. I was like, "What's going on?" And they just started telling me about possible Minus sequel. I'm just hoping it's Hedra. Really hoping it's Hedra.
It's kind of surprising, but it's also kind of not surprising, right? Like, you come hot off the heels of -1. You know, it's commercially very successful, but I think like the cultural impact of the movie is probably among the largest in the series on an international stage.
It also won the Oscars. So.
Exactly, right? Like, it was the Godzilla movie that won the Oscar. And I feel like anybody could have reasonably seen this coming, but to see it so soon after, when you think about the gap between Shin Godzilla and -1, it was like 6 years before we heard anything. And now it's like, oh yeah, it's greenlit that we're going to make a new movie.
I wonder if this also goes back into that writer's room that Toho was making about a couple years ago for the World of Godzilla. Do you remember that?
I do remember the World of Godzilla. They were talking about it almost as if it was going to be like a cinematic universe, but nothing really happened.
Well, unless this is still like a continuation of it. If they keep doing them as period pieces, maybe that's what they're doing, and they're going to lead up to a modern Minus where he has to do whatever, fight Ghidorah or something.
The announcement for this new film did not mention anything about -1. It only mentioned that it was Yamazaki returning to do it. However, just before the announcement, he tweeted this. He said, "Oh, something on my neck." So it feels like it's implied that this is going to be a sequel to -1. I think everybody's calling it colloquially -2.
We knew that's where it was going to go from at the end of Minus. I just wonder, will they actually build off of that the neck thing? Mm-hmm. Or will they just kind of bypass that as either like something that's explained or just ignored? The franchise does ignore a lot of loose ends at times.
I've seen one direction that they might take it. They were suggesting that perhaps there are going to be many people with similar markings and they'll be sort of ostracized in society. And it won't be like she's going to turn into Godzilla. It'll be a narrative around like segregation, something like that.
Oh, it sounds like it could be a good political movie or something.
Yeah, I mean, but they could also go in the other direction where it's like, yeah, she starts to mutate into Godzilla.
She turns into Gyra.
Yeah.
Or female Frankenstein. It goes woke, makes female Frankenstein.
You know, I wouldn't hate it because ever since the end of Shin Godzilla, with the Godzilla human hybrids that we never got to see in action, like, I've been very curious to see what that might look like. I can imagine it being very difficult to pull off without feeling really cheesy. For the folks that may have not heard your idea on the podcast before, you actually had a suggestion for how Hedorah might be integrated into a -1 sequel. And apparently Yamazaki was at New York Comic Con earlier last month and suggested that he wants to have Hedorah in a movie. He wants to incorporate Hedorah. So can you...
You're welcome!
Yeah, this one's free, Yamazaki. It's on the house.
No credit needed.
But can you share a little bit about the idea you had for integrating Hedorah into a -1 sequel?
Just set it in the 1970s during the height of the Japanese oil crisis, and then just tie Hedorah's origins into that somehow. Either keep it with an alien or somehow with the government trying to make something related to the oil crisis. Then you could have as what you just said, with the alienating of the survivors of the Minus attack, which would be... How old would they be then in the 70s? In the 50s then?
Well,
60s?
In the 70s, they'd all be like 20 years older.
So yeah, they'd still be... You could probably still use the same actors and use some makeup to make them a little older.
Yeah.
And you can have your returning cast members mix it up with the survivors that you said with the
ostracized people.
Yeah, I've literally trying to think of the word.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can have that, and then somehow, Godzilla's coming back, and he has to fight Hedra, and there you go. But yeah, it's Hedra and the oil crisis of the 70s. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Because with the CGI they have, especially with Minus, they're going to be able to do crazy things with Hedra that you'd never be able to do with a suit.
Mm-hmm.
Like tentacles, stuff like that coming from him.
Mm-hmm.
Like it could get crazy, especially if they, like, I don't want to say turn it into like Venom, but almost Venom like, in just being able to slither around, and if they go that route.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because like we can only assume at this point that it's going to be a versus movie. He's talked a lot about how he wants to do a versus movie. He's talked about Hedra. But if you go in the opposite direction where it's not a versus movie, do you think that a sequel to -1 could work without another monster? Like, I don't know how you do a sequel without it feeling very similar and almost like retreading that first movie.
I think you would have to take Godzilla out of Japan. You would have to like set Godzilla loose on, say, I want to say North Korea. Not just because North Korea deserves it, but because of just the whole politics that would go on behind it. Like, everybody's going to want to stop Godzilla from going into South Korea, but North Korea is not going to want to help from anybody. So like, just that type of political game. And you can still, if you don't want to use North Korea, you can still go the way of even, what if Godzilla popped up in Vietnam? Like, you put Godzilla in any number of like war scenarios, you can tell a really cool story that way. That's what I love about IDW's comics right now, where they're just throwing Godzilla in any scenario that comes to mind.
Yeah, like it feels very not piecemeal, but like sort of a la carte. They're just like, oh, like, what if this happened to Godzilla? Yep. Like, what is this new series? It's like Godzilla versus Detroit or something. Was it Godzilla versus Detroit? Am I just making that up?
I know there's a Skate or Die one that's coming out.
Yeah, and like the antagonist is Varan.
Yeah, why not? He's finally getting a chance. Like, we've all seen, like, Varan got kicked out of GMK. And then, like, it's always like, in the big bads are always Space Godzilla and Destroya and Mecha Godzilla and Ghidorah. Well, okay, Varan was once supposed to be a big bad in the Heisei era, so
right. Yeah, maybe justice for my boy.
Justice for Varan.